Hi, everybody. It's Deborah Hamilton, and today I'm speaking with Terri Stockdreher. She is a colleague of mine on NAMV, Not One More Vet, a group that helps the mental health of veterinarians. She also is one of my colleagues in helping veterinarians understand what they're going through and to help in alleviating or understanding disagreements. Let me know what you think. Please take a minute to like and share this podcast, and I'm so glad you're here. Now let's listen to what Terri has to say. Hi, I'm Deborah Hamilton. Welcome to my podcast, Why Do Pets Matter? 10 years ago, with my iPhone and a script, I recorded the first episode of the Ultimate Pet Resolution Summit, which chatted with experts about conflicts over animals. Our conversations were intimate, honest, and illustrated how disagreements over animals occur and how those disagreements can reshape people's lives and relationships. In November 2019, I started Why Do Pets Matter, a new podcast that continued these informative discussions. I'm so excited to have you here with me, continuing my exploration into a more meaningful conversation about why pets matter to all of us. My guests and I will share ideas, stories, and experiences straight from the heart, unscripted and holistic. From the bravest moments to the most brokenhearted, we will explore how to resolve disagreements over animals differently. One thing I know for sure is I want to have more meaningful conversations that will help all of us unlock that deeply felt human-animal bond that drives the emotions of conflict. Hi, everyone. It's Deborah Hamilton, and I'm here again on Why Do Pets Matter? I'm so glad you're here, too. Please remember to like and share this podcast with others who you think might want to hear some of the people who are telling their stories of why pets matter to them. And today, I am so grateful to have my colleague on the NAMV Advisory Board for Blueprint, the Clear Blueprint program, here with us to talk about why pets matter to her. Terri Stockdreher is a psychotherapist who specializes in trauma-informed therapy for high-achieving healthcare and veterinary professionals who are burned out, emotionally exhausted, and tired of pretending everything is okay. Before we came on, we talked about this at length, so I'm so looking forward to what Terri is going to share with us today, because together we're trying to make everyone's life a little bit better. So Terri, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah. So glad to be here with you.
Oh, well, it's always fun. And so I'm going to ask you the first question. The only question that I ask is, why do pets matter to you?
Hmm. Oh gosh, they're everything, aren't they? They bring us joy, connection, laughter, and like this incredible bond that is, I think, really hard to replicate. I had some pets growing up, but because we were in the military, we moved around a lot. We weren't able to have like a dog or something a bit more engaging, perhaps. And so when I became an adult, is when I was like, I'm so getting like a pet. And I've just been so fortunate to have had some real soul connections with a cat, kitty girl, who lived to 18, and
Oh, wow.
now I know. Oh my God, she was just the most amazing cat. Um, and now I have our rescues, a Aussie Pyrenees mix, who came with the name Fozzie Bear, which, since I love Muppets very much, was just perfect.
It was meant to be. They
It was
knew when
meant
you
to
walked
be.
in and said, "Oh, this is Fozzie Bear." You said, "Wrap him up. He's coming home with me."
Yes, and in fact, like he's been sleeping behind me in patient sessions and meetings, for the last 4 years or so. So he is well schooled at this.
I love that. Mine is sitting behind me as well. In fact, he was so close to me before that I rolled back and rolled off
Oh,
because I didn't see him there. So yeah, they tend to be right there with us, and they're part of our I guess our mental health assistance.
mhm. Yeah, which can certainly be soothing for clients, but I think it also, the connection that it has with us humans can be really reparative. whether that's like, these programs that they have in prisons, right, where inmates are able to connect with empathy, service dogs of various kinds, military veterans, and the value that their companion pets have. And for Fozzie, especially, my husband and I weren't able to have children. And so he's been kind of this really great surrogate, for us, which admittedly we go a little crazy sometimes, but I figure this is my moment. So I'm making the most of it.
Absolutely. I mean, and that he was a rescue, and I always say, and he fell in butter, which was great. So he's
Mm,
being incredibly well cared for, and probably is sort of a part of your therapy work too, or maybe guided your therapy work from just the human world, but into the veterinary world, which of course creates that whole connectivity to animals.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, it was Fozzie that led me to working with NAMV. I had just come off from working at a local hospital for about 12 years in their PTSD program. I was kind of feeling this free, doing my own private practice, and not being quite as social media savvy. I'm like, I should probably try this out. Let me make an account for my dog, right? How badly can I screw it up if it's for my dog? And at the time, Nambi was doing this campaign with, I think it was Re-Rate Dogs, on raising awareness of veterinary suicide, which I was just aghast at, that, these lovely human beings that are so passionate and giving of themselves to work with animals would, have to experience something like harassment or bullying, those sorts of things that could drive them to have such really significant mental health problems.
It is sometimes very earth-shattering to me as well that um, veterinarians feel so mm, disrespected
Yeah,
by clients when they can't fix their pet, that we don't necessarily carry that into the human health world. If they can't necessarily find an immediate cure, we work with them to find an immediate cure. Tell me what you think might be the driving factor. And this is not scientific, this is just anecdotal, uh,
mm,
that makes or creates people's reactivity to their sick pets. I have my own thoughts, but since I'm only a lawyer and not a trained professional, I'm sure you've thought of it, both having Fozzie Bear there during your clinical meetings that might ground people, but also when you and I have worked together on the NAMV board, when we hear people chat, we often think about how we might think of something differently.
yeah, yeah. It is really interesting. I wonder that some of it is, over the last at least decade, if not more, there are more pet owners, and companion animals have become more centralized in our lives. I think that's part of it. But, when it is this precious connection, right, it becomes um, really a place of, I think, fear for folks, and not knowing what to do, dealing with their own stuff. And sometimes even there's overlaps of unrecognized trauma. And so those things that happen earlier on in life, right, that they get activated by today. And so the people involved on either side of the conflict, may not even be aware of what's driving it. They're just kind of overcome with emotions and responding, in the moment.
That is such a great insight because for me, I think sort of the same way. It comes out that we feel helpless. And there were times in our lives when we felt helpless before. And because our pets can't talk, they can't tell us really what's happening. They can limp, but they can't say, well, it's my knee, my ankle, my this, my that. And we feel a great deal inept to help our pets. And we look to our veterinary medical groups to help us. And they do really great work. And in their course of study, they don't necessarily get the opportunity to learn how to communicate that work in an empathetic way.
Sure. Well, I mean, where do any of us learn that from? I mean, you have such great skill and experience and a lot of training, right? And a lot of practicing. Therapists who normally people would think, oh yeah, we must have all of our, stuff together, which I mean, there's often a reason why we go into mental health, that's driving that. And, like we're all not that skilled. And that's not even taking into consideration that even if we have the best skills and experience, we all have moments, right? Where
Yep.
we're not our best selves. And so I think you're right on with that because we don't learn conflict and communication very many places.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard to recognize that, and you said it before we got on the podcast, you said breathing. If we could just take a moment to breathe.
Yeah, well, I mean, it requires vulnerability. And to be able to see another person's point of view, to be able to pause, requires us to have at least some level of vulnerability. And if in the moment we feel threatened, whether that's like a misperception, perhaps, based on our past experiences, or, could actually be, what's happening, that makes it ever so much harder to slow down.
Oh yeah. Yeah. You take your experiences into the room with you, which is so impactful to someone who might not at all be like the last Terri Stockdreher that you just spoke to. You know,
Yeah.
this person might look like her, might speak like her, but she's not her. But since you have this experience, this, I always call it sort of bias,
Mm-hmm.
walking in, you carry that in with you, and it is sometimes very difficult to, first of all, identify that you're carrying it in with you like a backpack,
Yep.
and then enable yourself to not hold this person to the faults of the other person.
Right. Which how incredibly hard, is that to do if we're dealing with our own stuff, and even more so if we're not aware that that that's what's happening, and for the other people. Um, so that plays out like in direct engagement, like the vet tech, trying to deal with the customer, the client, right, and the client's animal. But it also plays out in leadership and in organizational development, and that's one of the reasons why I really love like Clear Blueprint, is designed for creating mentally healthy workplaces.
Yeah, and from top to bottom, not
Right.
just from bottom to top. Not
Yes.
just get the. I love when I'm called in to help two or three levels get better, and I said,
Mhm.
well, this is like a team. So not only do you have to call everybody in, because if I teach 15 people a different way to handle the conflict and the stress, they either will rub off on the people who didn't get there, or they may find it so difficult to maintain this new language that they might have learned, because people are looking at them like they're crazy, because you know
Mhm.
probably like you, we give them some helpful things to either say to themselves or say to someone else, that one person might look and say, what do you mean tell me more? Why would
Right.
you ask them to tell you more? They
Right.
told you enough.
Yeah, completely. And so having those practical skills for frontline people is empowering, right? And if they don't have leadership backing, how far does that go?
Yeah.
Much the same, right? If leadership is trying to create this culture of, compassionate boundaries and support, um, of recognizing our whole humanity, right, as people doing work and people receiving work, that it won't go anywhere either if the rest of the organization doesn't participate.
How important do you think? Because I know that we've worked on NAMV's Blueprint program. I've been there since the inception. You've been there since it just was first rolled out. So we've been there a long time. And I think it's doing really, really well in gaining entire veterinary organizational support.
Yeah,
As you just said, it has to be a group effort. Why do pets matter? Well, because when we are talking about the people who work with our pets, everyone in the four walls has to be rowing the boat the same way. And
Mm,
I don't know how you feel, but I always think that the client should be in the boat too,
yeah.
because without transparency and trust, that creates a environment that may lead to conflict.
Oh, absolutely. And certainly that could damage customer relations, right? The livelihood of a business, but also just the personal impact for the owner and for the pet.
Yeah, I'm sure that you have helped a few veterinarians work through difficulties. I know I have. I once spoke at a conference and I introduced myself as Deborah Hamilton. I'm an attorney and a breeder of Irish setters and long-haired dachshunds. And how many think I'm your worst enemy or your worst
Right,
nightmare? I said worst nightmare, and they all raised their hands. And I went, and you don't even know me.
right, right.
And so that's the kind of thing we need to, and that's the kind of thing I think Blueprint has been wonderful at doing with everyone's help on the Clear Blueprint team to
Hmm.
really take a step back,
Yeah,
recognize what you're bringing in the room, and then enable you to be the best person. And if Terri isn't being her best self today, uh, allowing her the grace that she's having a really bad day.
sure. Well, and the power of circling back. Yeah, that it's not necessarily everything is a last opportunity.
Mhm.
Um, there's great healing that can come from circling back with that kind of transparency, with clear boundaries, right, that are compassionate. Because as Brene Brown says, right, like clear is kind. Um, and I really believe that when a workplace, when staff are happy-ish, right? Like, when they're feeling as though they're contributing, their work is valuable, right? They're important, they're making a difference. It's a place that they feel welcome to go to. But how could that not impact, you know,
Right.
direct patient care? It only makes it better.
It's the transparency that I think is so important. I love boundaries. I think boundaries are great. I'll volunteer and admit that boundaries are not my strong suit. However, I'm getting better at boundaries. And what I think needs to happen is don't draw the boundary in crisis.
Well, I think when we are unskilled and unpracticed at boundaries, it can freak us out. And so we can end up on either side of a spectrum, right? We can end up with no or less boundaries and then feeling resentment or anger or,
Right,
hurt.
because everybody's trotting on my time.
Right. Exactly.
Don't they
Uh,
think I have a life? No, I don't, but that's beside the point.
right, right, right. Who do you think you are?
That's right.
Or we go on the other extreme where now we're like super harsh or really rigid, right? And the more that we bring that awareness in and practice that, especially like you said, right, on lower impact situations,
Yeah.
like that makes it so much easier when it's hard.
It really does because understanding the boundaries when there's not a crisis, you're not in your amygdala listening to the other party. And if you're in your amygdala listening to the other party, no matter what they say, at least in my very uneducated world, is you just stink. That's how I'm going to take any boundary you put up while I'm in my amygdala. You just stink. You just aren't doing your job. You aren't helping my pet. You aren't doing this. You aren't doing that. And that's what really brings the negativity into veterinary medicine that creates, the soup that we find ourselves in that have veterinarians committing suicide.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, you're totally onto it that it is a nervous system response. And oftentimes it can kick off this fight, flight, fawn, that's neurologically based. Our body gets flooded with these hormones that literally make it harder for us to think and be able to respond. And so, of
Yeah.
course, that makes it. And so, if we're behaving that way, if we're behaving from a place where we aren't our best selves, or perhaps maybe less than that, that all of us are doing at various points in our
We are
lives.
pedaling as fast as we can, and sometimes our feet slip off the pedals.
Right, right. So, of course, it can lead to more hurt and opportunities for learning and repair.
So I love that because that is the whole crux of what you and I do for NAMV as advisors to Clear Blueprint.
Mm,
However, what is it that you do that you share with your clients who are in this vulnerable state, who feel as if they're being disrespected, to give them, you know, the strength to recognize when they're going down the rabbit hole and
mm,
how they can stop themselves, because you can't stop me from going down the rabbit hole if I'm, already crazy. However, you can stop yourself.
mm.
So it should be that you can't stop the other party from going down the rabbit hole, but you can stop yourself from following them. And what do you suggest is like one or two things that somebody can do if they find themselves, because you deal in this incredibly thoughtful area of helping people with trauma, and post-traumatic stress disorder, which is so prevalent and being studied so much more now than it ever has been. What are like one or two things that the listeners, whether they're a pet owner, a veterinarian, a
Mm.
lawyer, could use to just be that person who doesn't follow someone down the rabbit hole?
Yeah. Yeah, so the good news is that there are things that can be done that are really simple. And they are so simple that people sometimes feel like they don't work. But it is things like taking a few deep breaths. And that is not meant as problem solving. I think that's where people can get kind of irritated that the goal for that is not problem solving. It is to help you to center yourself and come to a place where you're better able to do that problem solving. So, taking long, deep, smooth breaths or other body centered things like pressing the balls of your feet into the ground, moving around a bit, slowing down the pace of your words, not like you're being belittling the other person, slowing down, in
Yeah.
that kind of way, but just to
Don't
kind
be
of
a condescending prick, as my sons always say to me when I'm being, when
right,
I'm
right, right.
not being my
You're not
best. Yes.
talking like a child to them or
Yeah.
anything, but when we get all amped up, right, what happens to our voice? And sometimes it's also taking a break. And I know, like, usually when people say those things, it's like, ah, that doesn't really work or that doesn't matter. But it's really just to get those hormones in a way so they can reabsorb and we're better able to do that problem solving.
Yeah. I mean, I love that. I think that I always tell veterinarians in my workshops, just 1, 2, 3, 4 in, 1, 2, 3, 4 hold, one,
Yeah.
two, three, four out. No one will see you doing it,
Mm,
especially if either you've had a bad situation and you're coming into a new room and you have to center yourself, or if someone is really going off on a tangent and you're like, WTF, what am I
yeah.
going to do? Just, and as I said before, when I'm in that situation, I always thank Terry for sharing that, because it was really important that she told me how she felt. And can you tell me more? Because that not only shows that you listen to her. Thank you for telling me this and this and this. You should say what they're saying.
Mm,
And I appreciate you telling me that. And can you tell me more? Because it's really important, I know. Because then they're going to, and I'm sure you found this in your practice. If you listen to someone and you acknowledge what they said, even if they are the out of control person, often, maybe not always, but often, they take a minute and said, wow, Terry listened to me,
oh, sure.
heard what I said.
Hmm.
She didn't say she agreed with me, but she heard what I said and she repeated it back and asked me if that was what I wanted her to hear. And I said, yes. That helps them
Hmm.
get to a little bit of a better regulated place because you listen to them. I mean, that's what everybody wants, right?
Yeah, I mean, we all want
We're
to
not
be
good.
seen.
We're not
We
good
all
at
want,
talking about that information we want heard sometimes.
yeah, yeah. I mean, we all want to be seen. We all want to feel as though we matter, right? And that our hearts are important or our opinions are important, and that doesn't mean that we have to agree in order to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I always say the only thing that appreciating someone's point of view has in common with agree, are the letters ARE, and we're
That
going to work this out as long
is great.
as, long as we appreciate, I
Yeah.
don't have to agree with everyone, and yet their point of view is really important to them.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, and I think perhaps a missed opportunity can be what happens before. So in some situations, it's kind of foisted on us and we don't or have much time to think about how we're going to respond. But in many situations, there might be a couple of minutes for us to either gather ourselves so that we are in a better place. Like for instance, if we're rushing between patients and we haven't even had time to go potty and we're already thinking about the next thing, right? Like, what am I bringing to this difficult conversation? Is there a space where I can, I don't know, take those 3 minutes on the potty even to collect myself, or to plan ahead? Oh, you know what? Like most of my vet practice clients come with these kinds of questions or concerns. How can I speak to that in a way that they feel is really important and that might also, circumnavigate that conflict so that it's more successful?
Because I don't think it's meant by clients to make you feel as if you don't know veterinary medicine. I think it's meant this is what they did to calm their fears before they saw you. And I always say when somebody does legal research for me, it may be totally off point, but I say, thank you very much. And I'm going to read it. I really appreciate it. Now let's see what we can talk about with Fluffy or about the case or whatever,
Yeah,
because everyone's trying to do their best. I have research questions that were totally off the point, and I go, that was a waste of my time. However, there were sometimes these little red herrings inside that I was supposed to see that I never would have seen if I hadn't gone off on a tangent.
hmm,
So it really is important to enable people to feel as if they have agency to talk to you both within your practice, your staff, that they have agency to talk to you, as well as your clients, that they have agency to talk to you, that you're going to listen, that you're going to respect that they have a point of view, and work together to try to um, have everyone keep top of mind that we're here for Fluffy, or we're
absolutely.
here for Fozzie
Mhm.
Bear, right?
Doesn't matter. Yeah.
Bear. We're here for Fozzie Bear, right? Or we're here for Juniper.
Yeah.
So let's not, get personal, but let's get together to see what's best for the pets. I know that we're coming to the end. Can you believe it? It's really ridiculous.
Mm.
We are. But the interesting piece is that a lot of conversations now that are really getting difficult have to do with cost of care. And I don't know
Mhm.
if you've had anyone have a discussion with you about cost of care, because there have been several discussions about cost of care and how to approach that. And it is a really delicate dance, I think.
Yeah, yeah. My sense of that is that, the world, especially right this moment, like prices are skyrocketing everywhere, which means that there's more scarcity at the same time. But there's also been so many advances in the medical field, veterinary field, so that so much more is now possible. And that paired with pet owners who are now wanting to do more for their pets, right? So there are more options available. I think that probably one of the most effective things would be awareness building, doing some psychoeducation, um, which could be in the moment, right? Like, here, we're giving you this estimate bill, and let me tell you what's the priority or how this is going to affect things, right? As well as more like community awareness building. And that also naturally means there's more of a collaborative, more of a we spirit in the work so that you're part of this community.
Yeah, that's why I always want to bring the client into team, because once they are feeling, trust and transparency and collaboration as part of the team, giving them information is going to be more palatable than if it's just a one-off. We're looking at the dog and we're not necessary, especially now that so many practices have gone to using their vet techs more effectively, which is
Mm,
wonderful, without any explanation why.
mm.
So,
Right.
so, um, you
How
know,
valuable is that,
and we'll
for
build our
them?
own
Yeah,
story, Terry, right?
yeah,
Why are they doing that?
totally.
Well, they're trying to save money, and they're
Mm,
charging me more, and yet I don't even get to see the vet. And I'm like, you need to write the story, as Brene Brown says. The story I'm telling myself is this, and is that the story you want them to tell themselves? Or do you want to help them tell the story the way you mean it, in that I'm using my vet techs more effectively because they're very well educated. They can gather so much information. Some people feel more comfortable talking to the vet tech. I'm always here, but it's always wonderful to have two heads instead of one. Now, doesn't that sound so
absolutely.
much better?
Well, and I think too that if we can approach these learning opportunities, right, from not a place of like begrudgingly, ugh, I'm having to deal with this, but really like these kind of skill development, the awareness building, um, the connections, right? It's not just in the work itself. This ripples out to better families, better relationships, right? And then better clinical skills. So it all feeds. That's why I, started doing this kind of work, focusing on like healthcare providers, veterinary providers, because the reach is so great. Yeah.
Oh yeah. And the commitment to the pets is so great, so that
Hmm.
helping them help their clients is such an important task. So I could talk to you forever. We'll have to have you back. Absolutely. But how can someone get in touch with you? Because if they're in trauma, if they really need to speak to someone, how would they get to have you help them?
Yeah. Well, I would so grateful for that interest. Love working with folks in different ways. Therapy wise, can do that by reaching out to my website, www.bravelivingcenter.com. So that's brave with a B, like boxer, livingcenter.com. I also do customized talks, guest talks, and consultation for mentally healthy workplaces, and continuing education trainings.
I love that. And we're going to have to collaborate going forward, because I know that we're putting together some programs for veterinarians to attend. So you're going to be at the top of my list as a colleague who can help us look at it. I always appreciate working with people inside and outside the
Mm,
veterinary community, so that we can get a broader understanding of how people see each other, speak to each other, have feelings for what's being said or being done, because we all take our experiences with us. And if we don't have diversity in that
mm,
experience, then we sometimes create solutions that aren't really going to work for the people we're making the solutions for.
absolutely. Yeah. And the impact that that has, you know, on the animals in our lives.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Well, Terry, I'm going to put all of your connectivity on the podcast. I'm so glad you're here. I'm so glad you spent this time with us.
Thank
Uh,
you so much for having me. This has been fun.
I was thrilled. And until next time, everyone, please kiss your pet for me. This is Deborah Hamilton, the Why Do Pets Matter podcast. Please like us, share us, and let people know what you think of us. Take care.